Scaling secrets you aren't supposed to know. Welcome to today's episode. Excited to talk about a systems problem that comes around twice a year. I live in New South Wales in Australia, and in spring and in fall, we have these clock changes. Now, I'm not such a big fan. Why? Because I'm a surfer. When the clocks go forward, that means that what was 6 o'clock is now 7 o'clock. And that means that there's less time to surf in the morning. This is frustrating. This is annoying. I'm actually a supporter of daylight wasting, if there was such a thing, where we could all begin work at 10 a.m. and sure, you'd finish at 6, but there would be better waves for the surfers. Now, just in case you're wondering, surfing is actually one of the more difficult experiences. And after, I think, 13, 14 years, I'm finally getting it, which sounds ridiculous, but if you have tried to surf, you will know that it is really not that easy. It is probably the hardest thing. Perhaps business is up there because there's so many aspects, but surfing is difficult because there's just so few opportunities to practice. And I really didn't get anywhere until I got a private one-on-one coach. And he was like, dude, your back knee's going down. You'll never surf anything more than 2 foot crumbly if you don't sort this out. And so over the last 6 months, I've just practiced over and over 20 times in the morning, landing that back foot, getting it up first, staying away from the knee. Now, does it still happen? Yes, it does. It's amazing. It's like that body memory still comes through, but I am doing far better than I was. But this daylight saving thing is interesting. It's interesting because for the first week, everyone's kind of like, oh man, what day is it? What time is it? There's this basic brain fuzz as we try and move everyone an hour forward. And there's actually, I was reading some stats, it was very interesting. It said that California has an increased rate of car accidents when you move the clocks forward. Why? Because everyone's still half asleep. Like, you're basically moving people's sleep. You got the rug, you chop the bottom bit off and you stick it at the top and go, yep, we saved some daylight. I'm like, no, you didn't. What you've got to realize is that we now live in a very different world from when daylight saving was introduced. You see, I believe it first was promoted maybe in New Zealand of all places. And they're like, let's move the clocks 2 hours forward in like 1840 or something like that. But it really didn't take place until World War II when everyone started moving their clocks forward. It's like, okay, daylight saving may have made sense back then. Why? Well, there was no particularly efficient methodology for getting information around the world. Come forward to 2021, do we have an efficient methodology for getting around the world? Yes, we do. Yes, it's the internet. You see, your clients may be located in any aspect of the world. My clients are located around the world. And it's like, hang on, when we all swap our clocks all the time, it's a pain. Because there is missed opportunities, there's wastage, people miss meetings. They're like, I thought it was an hour ago. I thought it was in an hour. All of these time changes worked in a 1940s, in a 1950s, in a 1960s, a 1970s world, 1980s world. But as we started to kick in 1990s, only a few people affected. 2000s, a few more people. Come 2010, 2020, the whole world gets affected when these time changes come in. I've actually got to be across all of the time changes. When you guys change in California, when you guys change in New York, when you change in UK, when you change wherever you are in the world, it's like, oh man. And yes, there are tools. I get that there are tools, but perhaps we could shift to more of a personal responsibility. Why don't we just line the clocks up with the sun at midday? When the sun's directly above, that's midday. And then if you want to get up at 6 o'clock and go to work until 3 p.m. or 2 p.m., hey, great. That's great. Guess what? Your clients might be in Europe and you're like, this works great for me. Perhaps you want to work from 10 till 7. You're like, I want to choose that because my clients are in the United States. Great. Perhaps you want to work, I don't know, whatever you want to work. So let's stop messing with the clocks and go, you know what? You know how you want to live your life. You want to stay up all night? Cool. Okay, no worries. But let's get rid of this clock changing. It's so stupid. It worked in a pre-tech world. That is not our world right now. The difficulty is systems change. Like, that is a big deal. It takes a lot of courage for a politician to go, you know what, we're getting rid of this thing that is a relic of the past. And recognizing when systems aren't working is an art form, particularly if you don't really understand systems in the first place. Let me give you an example. So I'm working on a new webinar, and this new webinar's got an interesting problem. I went through and created tags. If you're using Infusionsoft, if you're using ActiveCampaign, if you're using Kajabi, if you whatever you're using for your emails, you might be using tags. In your CRM, you might be using tags. And so when you come to assign those tags, I want to do it per email campaign. I'm like, hey, when you opt in to the webinar, when you show up to the webinar, there's a tag, there's a tag. If you don't come, there's a tag. And irrespective whether you came or whether you showed an interest in all, here's the closing of the cart. Here's a tag for that. Now, at the moment, the way that the system's set up, it's like, hey, I got to do this tagging thing 5 times, but really it's the same thing. And I'm like, man, this system isn't set up right. This system isn't as efficient as it should be. Now, the very fact that it takes a lot to get to that place is one thing, but know that I can do the work this out in its most efficient form, and then give it to you. And if you are willing to follow the instructions, or your team are willing to follow the instructions, then you will get the results far more efficiently than if you just go about however you do your webinars right now. A lot of times people like, it takes me 3 months, it takes me 4 months, it takes me 6 months. I'm like, dude, a webinar should be taking like 2 weeks, maybe even less if you've got multiple teams. You're like, okay, when we can work on things in parallel, I want you on email copy, or you're doing the slides, you're doing the webinar, you're doing the graphics, maybe it's 1 week. But you are not pulling that off without systems. And you know, the interesting thing is that big players are like, well, I want to take the business that's doing 3 million. I want to take the business that's doing 5. I want to take the business that's doing 10 and buy it. Because what are they going to do? Well, they want to grow it to 100. They want to take that 3 to 100. They want to take that 5 to 100. They want to take that 10 to 250 million. And how are they going to do it? Well, they're not going to do it themselves. Hell no, they ain't doing that work. What they're going to do is install those systems. You see, that's the difference between 3 million, 5 million, 10 million in revenue and 100, 100, and 250 million. Now, here's the interesting thing. Perhaps you want to play that game. Perhaps you're like, you know what? I'm doing 3. I want to learn how to take it to 100. And so what you could do, which I learned from website closers, is that you could do a partial sell. You could sell 70%, you keep 30%, and don't just look after the money. Yeah, you make more money. That's great. But what you're there for is to learn what they are doing. How are they installing those systems? Why? So you can do that for your next idea. You see, you've got all that cash now. You've already been through the 0 to 3, and then you sold out to watch how someone else came in and systemized it to take it to 100. That's the learning. That's the power of these systems. And they can do it over and over and over. They're literally saying, hey, look, if you're at 3 to 10 and you'd like to go to 50, if you'd like to go to 100, if you'd like to go to 200, then hey, we're interested. Why? Because they can buy a part or all of you and take it to those numbers through systems. If this is something that you'd like to do, you're like, you know what, man, maybe these systems things are important, because they are. They're the difference between a business that can scale and the business that gets stuck at a hard ceiling. It is very difficult to scale beyond certain numbers, 3, 5, 10, without having systems on point. If you would like to know how to integrate systems into your business, if you are struggling with your project management system, if you are struggling with your standard operating procedures software, if you cannot work how these work together, why you even have them, guess what? You have a systems problem, and it is costing you millions. millions of dollars in revenue, millions of dollars in future scaling. This game is the game. You cannot tell me that the multinationals are running without systems. They are. They are 100% running on system. System for travel, system for production, system for marketing, system for sales, system for advertising, system for fulfillment, system for taxes, system for legal, system. If you don't know how to do systems, you have a systems problem. And you better learn how to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have to sell out to someone who does. If you want help with your systems, head over to systemio.dev. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I certainly did. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you as we continue looking at the power of systems to create results. I'll see you tomorrow.